This episode of Walt Disney World Today is sponsored by DVCBuyResale.com. DVC by Resale is a great place to buy or sell your Disney Vacation Club points. You can view the current DVC resales, get answers to frequently asked questions, and see the DVC point charts, all by going to www.dvcbuyresale.com. Or you can call Chantel, who is the owner, at 1-800-844-4099.
This is Walt Disney World Today. Give us 5 minutes and we'll give you the world.
It's Friday, September 14th, 2007, and this is episode 309 of Walt Disney World Today. I'm Matt Hotchford from MGMstudios.org. On the show today, we have my cruise buddy Mike Newell of Mouse World Radio, and all I have to say to you, Mr. Newell, is Midnight Buffet.
Yeah, I got something to say to you, too, but I can't say it here. So.
And hard at work sneaking in the new Van Halen reference into the 2009 unofficial guide. It's Len Testa of the unofficial guide to Walt Disney World. Welcome, Len.
How's it going, Matt?
Outstanding. And also on the show tonight, we have Mike Scopa of MousePlanet.com and All Ears Net. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, Matt. I'd like to, instead of doing my usual podcast opening, I'd like to do a call out to everyone who has been sending me email over the last several weeks and asking where they should send their donation for Race for the Cure. Unfortunately, this year my schedule and Disney's schedule just does not make it possible for me to do the Race for the Cure for breast cancer down in Florida, but I would like to ask that everyone who is being so generous and offering to donate to this cause, please send me email, and I will direct you to a friend of mine who is also a friend of all of ours and is a very important member of the Disney Internet community who is doing an effort for breast cancer. So I'm just going to ask that everyone send me email, and we'll put it in the show notes, Matt, but it's mikescopa@gmail.com, and I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Noble, very noble cause. I encourage everyone to email Mike and please, get information about donating. It's always a great cause. And we have a number of special guests tonight. Our first special guest runs the de facto Walt Disney World information website and a good friend of mine and everyone else here tonight. It's Deb Wills of All Ears Net. Welcome, Deb.
Woota!
Hopefully here to explain what Debbie just said is Becky Menken of MEI Mouse Fan Travel. Welcome, Becky.
Yeehaw!
Oh, is that what it meant? Okay.
How about yeehaw? Thanks, man.
And last but not least, our favorite fill-in from North Carolina, it's Annette Owens of MEI Mouse Fan Travel. Welcome back, Annette.
Oh, thanks. Yoo-hoo.
Wow.
So, on today's show, we're talking about the Adventures by Disney trip to the Southwest. Annette, Becky, and Deb all just completed their trip to the Southwest. Annette, how long of a trip was it? How many days?
It was 8 days. 8 days?
8 days.
Seemed like a month, really. We were having so much fun. It seemed to last.
Wow, yeah.
Really a lot
It was like
of time.
a month. It was so much fun.
It was so much fun. There's so much cram-packed in there. Okay, Lynn. Shush. Right there.
So we brought these ladies on to talk about Adventures by Disney because it's something that a lot of people don't know a lot about. It's fairly new in terms of Disney's vacation packages that are around. And let's first start. I'd like to start with Deb and ask her off the bat, Deb, what was your perception of this trip going into the trip? What were you expecting? Did you have any preconceived notions of what to expect on this trip? What were you thinking going into this trip, really?
Well, my expectations were higher than I wanted them to be, but only because every person I had talked to, Becky included, who had done an Adventures by Disney trip just raved about it and said how much it was worth every penny and what an incredible experience it was. And never having been on an organized tour like this before, I really wasn't sure what to expect. So cautious optimism, I guess, going in and coming out just pure elation, and can't wait for the next one.
It's a pretty glowing review, I'd say. Now, Annette or Becky, Deb, I assume you haven't done the Southwest trip before, right?
No, I had not.
Becky and Annette, have you done this before, this trip, or is this your first Southwest adventure by Disney?
It was my first.
Okay.
It was my first as well.
Great. And you guys not only this wasn't just like an adult-only trip. There were kids on this trip also. And I was wondering, Annette, you brought your children on, and I was wondering, What kind of children events were programmed into the itinerary? What really appealed to them much more so than staring into a big hole in the ground?
That's exactly what they thought they were getting into, and at first they were not excited about going. They thought Mom was crazy to take the two girls off by themselves and do such an outdoorsy type trip. They thought it sounded more like a boys' trip. But once they got there and met some friends and started learning history, they're actually sneaking in that history, on the land as you're driving around and looking around. They were able to do some soap carving and some wind catchers when we were in Sedona.
Soap carving?
Yeah, yes.
What is soap carving?
You remember that from your time in prison? You remember that?
Yeah, the other Oz, when I was the Wizard of...
Oh, my goodness. And, at the Grand Canyon, we went hiking, ran from a deer. Did
that
some
killer
stuff.
snorting deer, right?
There was a deer.
Okay.
All right, Becky, as the... like Newell said, was there a killer deer?
I think that it was probably standing right next to the snipe.
Snipe.
Yes.
You've never done a snipe hunt?
Apparently someone had stumbled on some peyote while they were out there. Dude, can you see the deer? Dude, coming right towards us.
No, apparently there was some sort of forest creature that ended up chasing Annette, the girls, and Michelle, but we don't have any pictures to prove it.
Uh-huh.
We had us running, and me running should prove there was something.
Scopo would say that. I would say it only proved the existence of dessert, but okay. It took a second. Thank you.
I was wondering if someone could describe the climate of the trip without using the phrase dry heat. Because I really don't want to hear that again.
Cooler than expected.
Really?
Very comfortable.
Let me set the stage for this trip so that and then Becky or Deb can comment on it. You guys went to the southwestern desert portion of the United States in the middle of August, which in the northern hemisphere is what we call summer, and it was cooler than expected.
It actually was. Linda and I flew into Phoenix a couple days before the tour began. And Phoenix was hot. It was 115 degrees. And let me tell you, we were feeling the heat big time. But as we traveled further north, we also went up in elevation. And so it actually was, I wouldn't say comfortable, but it was warm. And it was definitely hot, but it was not unbearably hot. And probably the hottest that I got personally was when we hiked up to Delicate Arch in Moab, in National Arches, in Arches National Park. But we were also up about 5,000 feet. And we had virtually no shade. Other than that, we were in and out of a lot of shade, and I didn't find it unbearable at all. I have found Florida and Disney World in the middle of the summer worse than I think most of our days were.
I agree. One of the things that they do try to do is schedule a lot of those outdoor activities in the early hours of the day so that you can escape some of the midday heat.
Yeah, I was going to ask, Annette, I think you were about to mention it. I mean, you coming from North Carolina, which is in the southeast, and I don't think I have to tell you that in the southeast it gets a little not only hot but humid. I mean, would you say that it was worse or better than being at home in that kind of weather?
Well, especially when it was warmer at home with 60 and 70% humidity. As to where I went, it was so comfortable out there. I really was very, very comfortable. You didn't walk outside and get that wall of humidity hitting you. It was really nice.
Becky, why don't you, I was talking to you at Magic Meets, and you were telling me a lot about how you were prepared to die in the middle of the desert because of the strenuous activity you were expecting. How strenuous really was it?
It really wasn't as much walking as I had anticipated. There were a couple of days that there were some moderate hikes that you could elect to take, or you could elect to stay on the bus or go to one of the other activities. They have an area where you can take the 45-minute walk, or you can stay in the visitor center and watch a film. So I wouldn't not go on the trip just because you think you might not be able to do the walks. But even the rafting day was something that was much more mild than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, absolutely.
I was going to ask Annette, Go ahead.
Did anyone sing row your boats when you're on the rafting trip? row your boat. Hello? Anyone? Is anyone out there? Hello?
I thought it was funny, Len.
We let our guides do the rafting, rowing.
Michelle rowed. We had one of our
She did.
chefs rowing.
Never mind.
We
You
did
don't
the
have
water
to patronize me
throwing.
now. I'm done.
We were too busy in the water throwing, and the water fight actually was more the preoccupation.
Yes.
Annette, how did your kids do with the physical activity? Were they able to keep up for the most part, or were they like, Mom?
You know, I have to say that they did really well on everything, but the day we did the hike up to Delicate Arch, it was quite interesting to listen to several of the kids who were very active, played sports, did all sorts of stuff, talk about how strenuous. There was a section that got pretty strenuous there, and they were talking about how tired they were, and they actually gave kudos to the moms for hiking up this hill with 4 and 5 and 6 water bottles in their backpacks as the kids are complaining with nothing.
So your kids were like, oh man, I got to quit smoking.
No, they actually, it was well worth that hike, but there was a section there where they were all of us, I think most of them were, thinking, is it really worth it? But it definitely was.
Deb, what do you think would be an appropriate age for this adventure that you went on? Is there, would there be certain, if you had to guesstimate, between kids and older folks, not necessarily scope of age, but somewhere closer to the norm, what are we looking at? Would you recommend?
I think the young age really depends on the child. We had, to help me out here, folks, I think 8 years old was the youngest on our trip. We had a pair of 8-year-old twins. They seemed to do pretty well. It was really kind of neat as the week progressed, because in the beginning, I have to admit, those first 24 hours, I really wondered what I got myself into, because we had 36 people, of which 16 were kids. And not having children, it was a bit inundating the first day or so. But then the kids started to bond with each other. The adults started to bond. Everybody got used to each other. And it really worked out well. The kids all sat together at dinner at night. The adults all sat together. For the most part, the parents kept a good eye on their kids and kept them under control. And they were just being kids. And they actually were a lot of fun in many respects. What was real neat was near the end of the trip, we were all reflecting back, and a lot of the kids felt the same way some of the adults did, like, what have I gotten myself into? And the kids were saying that too, and then how much they really enjoyed themselves once they got to know the other people on the trip. So it's a long kind of answer to your question, but I think 6, 8 years old, and the oldest was like 14 or so, although we had a couple high school gentlemen on the trip, so they might have been older than 14. In terms of the adults, if you're in good shape for a trip like this, you do fine. And as Becky said, there were a lot of alternate activities. So if you didn't want to hike or you didn't want to do a particular thing, there was always something else that you could do that was less strenuous or that was indoors. And
like sitting inside in air conditioning?
It was a lot less strenuous than I anticipated, other than the hike to Delicate Arch.
One question I guess I want to ask Deb this, and feel free for the rest, Ned or Becky, to jump in. But I think the biggest knock on any Adventure by Disney trip is that it's really good, but it's also really expensive. Do you think that you got your money's worth? Do you think it's worth the extra money that you're paying?
Let's quantify. How much was the trip?
Becky, was about $2,200 a person.
Correct.
I'm trying to remember. $2,200 a person, which once you arrived in Phoenix included all your transportation, all of your gratuities except for the 2 guides that you had, most but not all meals, certainly paid for water the entire time, which was not a minimal expense. I think we went through over 500 some bottles of water on our bus. In the beginning, before I went on the trip, I was like, wow, this is really expensive. And I've done trips to national parks on my own before, where I've done all the planning. We stayed in the Motel 6, You could do it a whole lot cheaper. But let me tell you, it was worth every single penny and then some. And in some respects, it's probably the best value for your dollar of all the Disney products that I have tried up until this point. We were treated like VIPs every single place we went. I mean, the Disney name, you think it goes a long way here on the East Coast. You should see it in the middle of the Southwest. In all of these hotels, I mean, there were no problems. And if there was even a hint of a problem, you either mentioned Disney and it was taken care of, or the two guides we had, Tiffany and Mike, were outstanding. You couldn't even mumble something to the person sitting next to you like, gee, I wish we could have, or I wish we thought of this. They were on it, and they were on it until you were happy and smiling. Every place we went, we had local guides who shared their knowledge and their expertise with us, and these were very knowledgeable people. These weren't the kind of people where it was like, okay, yeah, I'm a student in college and I'm studying ecology or whatever it is. These are people who were very seasoned, who knew and who had worked in these areas or volunteered for a very long time. Even the simple things like every time we got to a new hotel, and we had 3 different hotels we stayed at, we'd get off the bus, we walk into the lobby, and either our adventure guides or representatives from the hotels were there. There was no check-in line. They handed us our room keys. By the time we walked to our room, our luggage was sitting there. I mean, I can't even tell you how wonderful that in and of itself was. But, I mean, I can go on and on and on, and I don't want to, but Linda and I are already planning. We've talked to Becky about getting another group together in 2009. We want to do Yellowstone. And if my schedule for trips next year in 2008 wasn't already filled, we'd be looking at an Adventures by Disney. It was that spectacular.
Wow. I mean, that's about as glowing a recommendation as you can get. And certainly if you say, I mean, the value for your money, if you think that that's what you get, I mean, that's what it's all about, really, you know? Because, I mean, we're just looking to make sure that we're going to get our money's worth, not like going to, like, Nine Dragons, for instance, and, completely overpaying.
Watch it, buddy.
One thing a couple things that I can add really quickly when you were talking about what was great for the families, the guides did a fantastic job with the children. I was really thrilled to see some of the things, some of the activities and the interaction that they encouraged for the kids to get to know each other. They had a movie night, which was actually only for the kids, but by the end of the movie, most of us adults were in there as well. It was really fun. That the guides were fantastic. They were constantly pushing the safety issues of the heat and the water. And I believe we covered almost 1,000 road miles as well on that bus. So we definitely did cover a lot of territory.
That's fantastic. And if you want to learn more about this trip, Deb blogged live from her trip. You can find it at AllEarsNet. I'll put a link in the show notes to her blog where she has a day-by-day breakdown of what happened. And Becky, you also did a guest blog over there, or was that on Mouse Fan Cafe?
Mouse Fan Cafe.
So there you go. I'll put a link to Becky's blog as well, so you can read and see exactly what was going on day by day. Because we don't have the time to go into it, but really, I was keeping track of Deb's trip, and I was also reading Scopa's blog when he was in the parks at the same time, and everything that entailed on that trip. So it's really it sounds like a great time, and we thank all of you for coming on to the show, Deb, Becky, Annette. And
just
Len.
One final thing, Matt, I wanted to say that Linda Mack, who's on the All Ears team, also was on the trip, had an awesome time. She also blogged, so if you go to Blog Central and All Ears, you can find hers too, and she took some amazing photographs.
Well, I will definitely put a link to that in the show notes as well. So if you want to find links to all those blogs and photographs and Len, then you'll need to go to www.today.com, and you can find all of that over there. And just before we go, a quick note of congratulations to our favorite listener, Linda of AllEarsNet, who won it big and is now retiring to Tahiti or somewhere with her huge windfall. So enjoy your windfall there, Linda. And again, this episode of Walt Disney World Today has been sponsored by DVC by Resale. DVC by Resale is a great place to buy or sell your Disney Vacation Club points. You can view the current DVC resales, get answers to frequently asked questions, and see the DVC point charts, all by going to www.dvcbyresale.com, or better yet, email Chantel, who's the owner, at info@dvcbyresale.com, and tell her that Mike Newell sent you. That's it for us today. If you want to find our older episodes, read our show notes, or send us your comments, visit the Walt Disney World Today website at www.wdwtoday.com. You can also email us at questions at wdwtoday.com. For Len Hester, Mike Swiftlet, Mike Newell, Becky Menken, Annette Owens, and Deb Wills, I'm Matt Hodge. See you on the next show.
Yeah!